Well, Square Enix decided to be brutally honest earlier today around their current financial situation for Forspoken and sort of the future and their outlook. And there was one answer they gave to a question from an investor that had a lot of people online concerned. And we're going to go over all of that here today. So if you guys enjoy the video, make sure you like it and subscribe if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel as we head towards 700,000 subscribers. Let's take a look here, though. This is the Square financial results briefing, and it's important to note that this report specifically is based on a briefing that they held on February 3rd. I want to point that date out specifically when we start talking about Forspoken here soon. But this would cover 9 months ending December 31st. So the quarter that they're mostly focusing in on here is that holiday time period, October, November, and December. They were pretty busy, by the way, in that quarter, even leading up to it at the end of September with many of their releases. However, they weren't exactly showing up with anything really to brag about when they compare it to the previous year. I mean, technically they were down Q1 to 3 comparatively. So they're kind of explaining exactly why. And then, of course, they have to explain the outlook kind of for Q4 because there technically is a big release in Q4 for them, and unfortunately, it hasn't really gone their way, and that has to do with Forspoken, because they are being questioned about it, and people are pointing towards it, specifically investors, as a way to, I don't really want to say salvage the year for them, because it hasn't been catastrophic. It just hasn't been great, or something you can point to and say, okay, we see obvious growth here. Because think about the number of games they released with DioField Chronicle and Valkyrie Elysium. Those released in the last week of September. So you figure those sales would kind of bleed over into this most recent fiscal quarter that they're going over here. Then you also had Star Ocean, Harvestella, Tactics Ogre, Dragon Quest Treasure, and Crisis Core Reunion. All of that happening in one quarter. That's a lot of stuff to just kind of put out there. The thing with Square Enix, though, I feel like they're pretty bad at marketing anything that's not a Final Fantasy or a big Final Fantasy. 16 clearly is getting a huge marketing push behind it, and I think that has to do with Square being very confident around it, whereas maybe something like Valkyrie Elysium and DioField Chronicle, they just kind of pushed them out the door. All right, good luck. That's that. And if you look at something like Harvestella, I feel like most people didn't even realize that was a thing or came out, even though we had a demo that dropped during a Nintendo Direct and all these things. It's just Square is not great at marketing, I guess you'd say, these AA quote-unquote experiences, kind of the mid-tier ones that clearly don't have the budget of some of these big-time releases from them, like Final Fantasy 16 or even Forspoken. Still, though, they did kind of go over that, and they did talk about their thoughts around performance so far from some of these games, and it wasn't exactly glowing. For example, they say net sales declined year over year in the HD games sub-segment, partly because the release of major titles a year earlier had created a challenging year-over-year hurdle, but also because many of the new small and mid-sized titles we launched this year did not perform as well as we had expected. The other part here is net sales were also down year over year in the MMO or the MOM sub-segment, in part because we released no new expansion packs this year as originally planned. So basically, DioField, Valkyrie, Star Ocean, Harvestella, Tactics Ogre, Dragon Quest Treasures, Crisis Core Reunion, to them, underperformed or didn't perform up to their expectations, and this just seems to be a trend with Square Enix. I'm not really sure what kind of expectations they draw out for some of these games, because even when you have something like Tomb Raider, which I figured did pretty well overall, I think that trilogy was 36 million or something like that sold, and they said that wasn't up to expectations, and they ended up just selling off the IP as well as all the studios and Crystal Dynamics. And then you see some of these titles that didn't have a massive budget behind it, like DioField Chronicle, and I guess even then they had expectations fairly high and it was unable to reach that mark. But the one that I kind of think really hurt them, and maybe it was softened a bit because clearly Sony did put some money into it since they have timed exclusivity, whereas the others, they didn't have that necessarily to fall back on, because they see here, lastly, I would like to discuss our outlook for fourth quarter, fiscal year 2023 or 3, and for the upcoming fiscal year, that again starts April 1st. So looking towards this current fiscal quarter, Forspoken did release. That was, as I say here, January 24th. So there's a chance that a big blockbuster title like that would help to pick up the quarter, and in turn, the overall fiscal year, as it is tracking behind last fiscal year, and that's, of course, what they compare year over year. They say reviews of Forspoken have been challenging. However, the game has also received positive feedback on its action features, including its parkour and combat capabilities. So it has yielded results that will lead to improvement of our development capabilities of other games in the future. That said, its sales have been lackluster, and while the performance of new titles with February and March release dates will be the ultimate determinant, we see considerable downside risk to our fiscal year 2023 and 3 earnings. So essentially, they are saying that yes, Forspoken, not exactly doing as well as we would have liked, and it's not going to save the quarter. And keep in mind, this is something that was conveyed to investors February 3rd. So 9 days after Forspoken came out, they looked at the numbers and said, ooh, okay, we're in trouble. And I mean, you look around and we did see some of the sales reports, whether it was NPD, the Japanese sales reports from Famitsu, the UK sales charts, wasn't exactly coming in with a very strong placement across the board. But it was pretty evident looking at it, using the Luminous engine and the years and years of development, it wasn't a cheap title to produce. And, I mean, do we need any more confirmation after they said that Luminous Productions would be, quote-unquote, folded in the Square Enix or essentially disbanded? And in fact, that's kind of reference here, because they say it has yielded results that will lead to improvement of our development capabilities of other games in the future. Essentially, Luminous Productions and what they were able to do with the Luminous engine in Forspoken might be applied to other games down the road, whether it's the parkour or just some elements of the combat, not like a cookie cutter, okay, we're going to take Forspoken's parkour and put it into this next Final Fantasy game that's a spin-off or some new IP, but they can pull elements from it. It's kind of the same there with the combat itself. And while Forspoken is a game that's very popular to just kind of beat down online, there were some positive aspects when it comes to the action and some of the parkour when it really gets going, at the end of the game. And then we get to the Q&A that had some people concerned and scratching their head a bit, specifically because of one sentence from an answer. This was a question from an investor. Well, I think it is fair to expect growth in fiscal year 24 and 3, in part because you plan to release multiple major titles. I also fear that you will create a year-over-year hurdle you'll be unable to surmount in fiscal year 25. What kind of initiatives do you have in mind to ensure sustainable growth? So let's say Final Fantasy 16 is a massive hit and it just out of the gate sells 12 million copies. It's got like the Hogwarts Legacy trajectory there right away. Well, how do you match that the following year? Because investors want that year-over-year growth constantly. Well, this is what Square said. Major title launches will not be concentrated solely in the fiscal year 2024 third quarter. We have organized our pipeline so that we will have a good spread of new releases in fiscal year 25 and beyond as well. We also hope that you will look forward to the blockchain games we plan to launch in fiscal year 24 and thereafter. So there you have it. Apparently we're going to see what these blockchain games are all about here pretty soon. It seems like within the next 12 months, they're going to release something. And this got people a bit concerned because it's like, oh, wow, okay, so you're actually doing something with that. You're going to release a blockchain game? I thought they were just interested in NFTs and digital collectibles that they can put out with an expensive statue and you get like a digital certificate of authenticity or something. No. They seem dead set on this blockchain stuff. And people were concerned about the new president coming in. This is Matsuda talking about blockchain games. The groundwork has already been set before the new president comes in, that people have linked through way of the old company he worked at that was kind of a PR firm that worked with different blockchain companies, which, yeah, at the time, especially a year or two ago, those companies were making a ton of money, so they're out there hiring some of the best PR firms they could. This is just Square saying, we're going to take a shot at it. And I'm curious if they're talking about a console game or a mobile cell phone game. We've seen Square do a bunch of phone games that they just take a shot at, like, all right, we're going to see how this Final Fantasy third-person shooter works out. And if it doesn't, they shut it down in less than a year. They've done that with other live service games like Babylon's Fall. But I don't know. Will they show up with a game, say, for the PS5 and it's just blockchain related? That'll be an interesting day to see that one. But yeah, things don't seem great right now at Square Enix. I guess the big positive right now they can look forward to is Final Fantasy 16 is really shaping up to be something special from what we've at least heard through the way of these previews. And I think it will be much better, significantly better even than Final Fantasy 15, which for a lot of people just didn't really hit the mark, myself included. I mean, I was okay with it, but it didn't feel like that big time Final Fantasy release. And since then, we've had a good MMORPG with 14. 13 was 12 was good, but you kind of see how far back we have to go to get to that really good Final Fantasy. So I'm hoping that 16 is able to kind of right the ship, get everyone really excited and celebrating about a brand new entry in the numbered Final Fantasy series. And then obviously they have Final Fantasy VII Rebirth to look forward to, and really a lot of Final Fantasy, which, to be honest, that's what Square should be doubling down on right now, is working to build out Final Fantasy in general with side projects, spin-offs, and other aspects. Whether it's you want to go turn-based, completely go traditional, and you play around with the idea of an HD 2D version of, I don't know, one of the older Final Fantasies from the 16-bit era, and you make it as traditional as possible. There you have some more that are action-oriented, and maybe you go back and do some strategy-based stuff as well. But that Final Fantasy name is probably going to carry even more weight after 16 releases, if it does indeed turn out to be that big blockbuster that I feel like everyone hopes it is. And then the other thing they have to figure out is their overall marketing strategy with some of these quote-unquote AA games or just smaller projects, and whether it's spacing them out a bit more and maybe figuring out your own direct style presentation that you can hold every couple of months and just showcase them, or working with more platform holders or something to have them help you with marketing. Because at least if Nintendo or Sony do kind of take the reins on the marketing, we see the game and we hear about it, whereas Harvestella, for example, just kind of gets pushed out there with little to no marketing or attention from Square. But there you have it. Forspoken, yeah, pretty much came in under expectations, flopped, didn't do well, however you want to say it. But it does appear now Square Enix has been consolidating over the last year or two. We see them get rid of their entire Western division just about, and even Luminous Productions being folded back into Square Enix. Seems like they're trying to get things back on track going forward, and now even a change at the top with leadership, Masuda out. It's going to be an interesting thing to see what happens with Square Enix over the next year or two. But let me know what you guys think about all of this down below, with them being just brutally honest with investors and everyone else when it comes to Forspoken and many of these other games that, I mean, I thought were pretty good last year that just didn't work out. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.